Hi, Vinyl community. On this episode, I am going to be ranking the studio albums of new wave pop legends Duran Duran. Duran Duran were Simon Le Bon on lead vocals, Nick Rhodes on keyboards, John Taylor on bass, Andy Taylor lead guitar, and Roger Taylor drums. There's no relationship between any of the Taylors. They were not brothers. Just coincidentally, they all happen to have the last name. They were formed in Birmingham, England in 1978, and they were one of the first bands to take full advantage of MTV as a medium to promote their image and also their albums in the early 80s. So I am going to be covering their entire studio discography. I really had thought about including the Arcadia album because technically it is 3/5 of Duran Duran on that album, but I resisted the urge, and I'm just going to be talking about the true Duran Duran studio albums. I'm going to start with number 14, my least favorite, Paper Gods from 2015. I don't care for this album at all. It could be any band or any singer doing these songs. The production is just so 2015. It's all club dance music. There's no personality behind it. It does not sound like a Duran Duran album. Like I say, if Simon Le Bon weren't on vocals, you could pretty much put any singer on this album and it would be just the same. I do not care for it at all. So absolutely hate it. Number 13, All You Need Is Now from 2010. This has a little more personality, I guess. At least it sounds a little closer in places to classic Duran Duran, but still not enough here that really engages me. I don't really care that much for a lot of the music, and it doesn't do anything for me. There are moments that are okay and I find enjoyable, but there are just not enough of them. Number 12, Red Carpet Massacre from 2007. A little better. I do like the title track. I like Box Full of Honey, which is kind of an acoustic rock song. Zoom In is fine. She's Too Much. Dirty Great Monster, I think, is a fun track. The rest of the album is really unmemorable, and I don't really care for it all that much. It's just indistinguishable from any other dance pop track that happened to be in the top 40 in that given year. Number 11, I'm going to go with Astronaut from 2004, which was the reunion album. Now, you would think an album that had all 5 original Duran Duran members on it, I would rank a little bit higher, but it does not sound like a classic Duran Duran album, even though all 5 original members reunited for this album. To me, it's very much overproduced. It's too polished. It doesn't have any personality behind it. It sounds very cold and impersonal to me. I don't care for it. I mean, the song Reach for the Sunrise, which was the first single, is okay. But honestly, everything after that is just, it's okay. I'm only ranking it a bit higher than the others because they do have all 5 members. I think Andy Taylor left after this album, or Red Carpet Massacre, but I mean, it's all right. I expected a lot more. I think that's why I'm so disappointed with this album, because I really thought you brought the 5 core members back together. Should have sounded at least a little closer to the original 80s Duran Duran albums. And there are bands who were influenced by Duran Duran that sounded more like Duran Duran in 2004 than this album did. So just not a huge fan of it. Number 10, Thank You, their cover album from 1995. Large majority of these covers don't work and sound ridiculous. I think White Lines is okay. Perfect Day, which was a single, is all right. Lay Lady Lay, Watching the Detectives. 911 is a joke. The song is a joke. I'm just not, I don't care for this album all that much. I think it's nice that they wanted to cover artists that they admired, artists that inspired them, but any other band it might have worked, but Duran Duran has no business covering a lot of the material that they covered on this album. Number 9, their album Liberty from 1990. They were back to a 5-piece band at this point, even though you didn't have Roger Taylor or Andy Taylor. They had Stephen Campbell on drums, and they had Warren Cucurullo, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, on guitar. It's okay. For me, I like The Violence of Summer is all right. My Antarctica is all right. Sirius is okay, but the rest of it, it's all right. It's not terrible Duran Duran, but there's not enough hooks there. There's not enough memorable tunes. I really liked the album Big Thing, and so this was kind of a disappointment to me when this came out because it's all right, but I think it could have been better. It just seems like it's very uninspired, and it was really underwhelming when it came out in 1990. Number 8, Pop Trash 2000. This is an album that I feel has been really overlooked in their catalog, and I really enjoy this a lot. Now, Duran Duran was down to the trio of Simon Le Bon, Nick Rhodes, and Warren Cucurullo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it's one of Duran Duran's most experimental albums, and I think that's a good way. They were taking chances on this album, and for a large part of it, I think that the experiments work. I like Lava Lamp a lot. I like Playing with Uranium. That's very psychedelic sounding. You got Starting to Remember, which has a nice guitar melody. Sounds a little bit like Oasis. Pop Trash Movie is very atmospheric. Lady Xanax sounds like a classic Duran Duran, almost like a Save a Prayer song. But I really enjoy this album a lot. If you haven't checked it out, I would definitely encourage you to do so because I think you'll find it's a lot more enjoyable than you expect. Don't let the title or the cover art turn you off, because if you think Pop Trash, you're probably thinking, oh, it's going to be a bunch of generic dance music, but it's really not. Unfortunately, I don't know why they chose that title, but it sort of betrays the music inside this album, which is actually very good. Number 7, Midazolam. This is another, I think, pretty decent Duran Duran album that's been overlooked over the years just because you had John Taylor on, I think, 4 songs, but primarily it's that trio again of Simon, Nick, and Warren. But they do a good job with what they have. I really like the tracks Big Bang Generation, Out of My Mind is great. Buried in the Sand, which addresses John Taylor leaving the band, I think is a cool track. Michael, You've Got a Lot to Answer For was a lyric about Michael Hutchence, who had just recently passed away. He and Simon Le Bon were good friends. And Undergoing Treatment is fun. It's sort of they're taking a little playful swipe at their own celebrity. But that Midazolam and Pop Trash are 2 of Duran Duran's most experimental albums, but I find them to be very enjoyable because they do take risks. They don't play it safe. They get into some areas that they not explored before, and I think they're both very rewarding albums. And if you haven't yet, if you're a Duran Duran fan, I would definitely check those out. Number 6, Notorious from 1986. This was after Roger and Andy had left the band, and they were wanting to produce music that was a little more mature than kind of the teen pop new wave that they had risen to fame on with their first 3 albums. And it does sound a bit more mature. There's a little more dance, mature club influence type music on this album. You've got the title track Notorious, American Science, which I enjoy a lot. Skin Trade is great. Hold Me, I think, was one of the few tracks that Andy Taylor actually played on. He really, his heart wasn't in it, and I think they had him in the studio at the beginning of the sessions, and then he just said, I'm out, I really don't want to be here. So he's only on a few tracks, but I think Hold Me is one of them. Meet La Presidente was one of the singles off here, which I think is a fun track. Winter Marches On. The sound does sound a bit dated. It does have that 80s feel to it, but I feel there's enough great songs here. There's enough solid Duran Duran sounding tracks on here that I do enjoy it, and that's why I rank it this high. It's definitely a departure from the Seven on the Ragged Tiger album, but in a good way. I think they've expanded their sound a little bit without going too far out there, and I think it's an enjoyable album. Number 5, I'm going to go with 1993's self-titled Duran Duran album, which some people refer to as the wedding album. I re-listened to this for the purposes of making this video, and I didn't care for it as much as I remember liking it back in the day. I think it does sound a bit dated. I think there's some obnoxious moments on this album. I know people are going to take me to task for not ranking this higher, but I just didn't enjoy it as much as I remember enjoying it back in the day. I think there's some 90s elements that are a little dated now. Ordinary World was a single, the big comeback single for them, which I think is fine. Come Undone is okay. They do a cover of Femme Fatale, the Velvet Underground song, which is all right. Breath After Breath is just very obnoxious. I don't know. There's too much of this album when I was listening to it that I really just didn't care all that much for, but it was a comeback album. The moments that are on here that are good are very good. So I'm ranking it as high as I can justify ranking it. And these are all just my own personal preference. I know in previous videos, some viewers have gotten bent out of shape because I ranked their favorite album lower, or I ranked a certain album too high. This is just my own personal preference. I'm not saying this is a definitive list or it's 90% objective. I'm just telling you what I prefer from the band's catalog. Just keep in mind, these are just my own preferences. Number 4, Big Thing from 1988. Maybe a little higher than most people would expect this album to be ranked, but I do enjoy it a lot. There's a lot on this album that still I like to go back and listen to. The opening track, Big Thing, is great. I Don't Want Your Love was a great single. All She Wants Is. And yes, those also sound a little dated with the 80s production, but I don't care. They're fun songs. It's Duran Duran doing what Duran Duran does best. Too Late Marlene is great. I really like Palomino. I think that's a real cool, moody track. I remember that being one of my favorites back in the day. I think Land is a very mature. They're expanding their sound even beyond what they had done on Notorious. So they're growing, they're expanding their palette. They're still doing some dance music, but there's some interludes on the second side of this album that sort of link the different tracks together, which I thought was pretty cool. Lakeshore Driving, what's the Edge of America, Lakeshore Driving, those two tracks kind of blend together. I think that is a cool experiment. You know, they got Warren Cucurullo on guitar. Somebody who knows the pronunciation of his name is probably crucifying me right now. But nonetheless, I mean, they got him on guitar, and I think he was definitely a great addition to the band. But it's a fun album. I think it's different. It's still an expansion of their sound, and I enjoy it a lot. Number 3, I'm going to go with their debut album, self-titled Duran Duran from 1981. Just a classic album, classic new wave, before they started getting into more commercial sounding music with their next 2 albums. Girls on Film was the big track that made a splash in America. The video was banned on MTV. You got Planet Earth, which is a great track. These are all very much synth pop songs. There is some guitar, but it's mostly dominated by the synths, and there's very much a disco beat to a lot of these tracks. Careless Memories, Anyone Out There is a great song. I like Night Boat. Just a really solid debut album, and I really do enjoy that one a lot. Number 2, Seven and the Ragged Tiger from 1983. Now, a lot of these songs have been played to death. There's The Reflex, New Moon on Monday, Union of the Snake, which I never have to hear again. If I never hear them again, I won't miss them. But it's the other tracks on this album. I mean, those are great songs. Just because I've heard them played to death doesn't mean they're not good tracks. But I really like Looking for Cracks on the Pavement. I like Shadows on Your Side. Of Crime and Passion is great. Seventh Stranger. All these album tracks on here I think are just as good as the singles that were off this album. I think it holds together really well. It's a classic Duran Duran album. They were at the top of their game. It's when they were at the height of their popularity. Their videos were all over MTV. Their songs were all over the radio. But that being said, I think that Seven and the Ragged Tiger is still a solid, damn good album. My number one, no surprise probably, is going to be 1982's Rio. Every single track on here is just amazing. My Own Way is great. The title track, obviously. Lonely in Your Nightmare is tremendous. Hungry Like the Wolf is a great single. Save a Prayer, also a great single. New Religion, great. Hold Back the Rain, just a great rock track from Duran Duran. And then The Chauffeur to close out the album, just that moody, kind of sinister keyboards, keyboard-dominated track I think is very good. You got the recorder at the end, which I think is a nice addition. I love Rio from start to finish. Love the videos, the singles. I don't mind hearing over and over again. They're that good. I got to give it up for Rio, my favorite Duran Duran album, and that's my list. Let me know what you think. Be kind. Remember, these are just my preferences. However you rank them is just as valid as mine. Who the hell am I? I mean, really, let me know what your list is. And I respect your list, respect mine. Just know where I'm coming from. I got into Duran Duran in the mid-'80s. A lot of my friends like Duran Duran, most of them, which were female, were into Duran Duran. And I kind of felt like, I can't really fly my Duran freak flag because you're supposed to be into Van Halen, you're supposed to be into Twisted Sister and Def Leppard and all that, which I like that music, but I always had a kind of a soft spot for Duran Duran also. So anyway, let me know what you think. What are your rankings? And as always, thanks for watching.